Europe within the last 100 years. So thank you for remembering. Thank you for coming. You're a real blessing. And I want to welcome, first of all, our Assembly member, Jack Sargent, who's been here at our memorials for now 3 years. So let's give him a round of applause. Thanks, Jack. And Emma, his girlfriend, who looks after him. And his mum, Bernie. So welcome. And Mr. Thornhill and his family. Mr. Thornhill is a teacher at Queensferry Primary School who is passionate about Holocaust and teaches the children about Holocaust. So we're really glad to see you tonight. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Mr. Thornhill. And also our special guest, Stephanie McMahon-Kay from Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Yad Vashem's the Holocaust Museum. And Steffi, sorry, you preempted it, didn't you? And Steffi has taught teachers from all over the world how to teach Holocaust. And it's 2,000 teachers, I think, you've taught, isn't it, in 20 years who have attended Yad Vashem. I'm one of her graduates, so it's a real privilege for me to have Steffi here. So thank you, Steffi. Let's give her a round of applause. And I want to give a big welcome as well to the children who are going to read tonight, because the children are reading about children in Holocaust. This year, we are focusing on children. Last year, we focused on abandonment of the Jews, but this year, it's about children. So we've asked the children if they would read stories about children in Holocaust. And they have come tonight to tell you what happened to those children. So I want to give them all a round of applause for coming. Thank you. And as well, a special guest, Izzy Owen from Mice Garment School in Mould. But Izzy is also part of Flintshire Orchestra, and she's going to play for us 2 pieces from Schindler's List. So, Izzy, thank you for coming. Thank you. It's really special. Now, when the children begin to read, at the end of their readings, we all want to applaud them, don't we? Because they've done very well. And when Izzy finishes, we would want to applaud her because she plays so well and the children read so well. But can we refrain from that? Because after Izzy plays, we just want a time of reflection. And then Steffi will speak. And then at the end, when we present the children and say thank you to them and thank you to the people who are involved, can we then applaud? Is that okay? Because we need to just think about what we're hearing about and contemplate what we understand of Holocaust. So if we can do that. But first of all, I'm going to ask Jack if he will come up and light the candles, or the candle, if the matches will work for you, Jack. And then after that, Jack will address us. Now, what I want to tell you about Jack is that he promotes something called the White Ribbon Project, which is a project that supports women who have been abused by their husbands or by men. And Jack also in the assembly is trying to introduce politeness between politicians. And I think that is just an amazing thing to do. So, Jack, a big welcome to you, and thank you again for coming, son. Okay, thanks, Jack.
Firstly, thank you, Pastor Michael. Thank you all. It always amazes me here. I've been here 3 times now, and this is my 2nd time addressing this evening's event. It always amazes me the kindness shown. Pastor Michael was just mentioned by my push for kindness at a political level, but there's no place I go to really more than this on a yearly basis, that the kindness shown by the people here and the people who come here is beyond belief. It really is the warmest of welcomes always. So firstly, I would just like to say thank you for that warm welcome. And thank you for the privilege of being able to address you all this evening. An evening which is a hugely important occasion. And again, for lighting this evening's candle, a huge privilege of mine. Before I start with my message, this evening's message, I'd just like to, on behalf of the community which I represent in Allen and Deeside, extend that warm welcome to those who have travelled far and wide to be here. No more than our very special guest, Steffi, as well. But I know we have in the crowd somewhere some people from South Wales and also Stoke as well. So it really is great to bring you and welcome you here to Allen and Deeside this evening. Now, each generation has a responsibility to teach the next what happened during the Holocaust. Now, it's a responsibility to tell the next generation of people who suffered, of the people who suffered, of the people who were murdered, and in particular, the 1.5 million children who were murdered during the Holocaust. Now, we must take that responsibility, all of us, each and every generation, our present generation and our future generations, and it's particularly warm welcoming to see so many of our younger generation here today, and which will share their message. So thank you on behalf of my residents and the National Assembly for Wales as well. Thank you so much. And we must do that so those that were lost are never forgotten. And their story, their very important story, is never forgotten. And also, it's for the next generation, our future generation, to understand this. Hatred is unfortunately out there in the world. But kindness brings us together. Events like this bring us together, and kindness will win. Now, the lessons learned and the lessons we will learn on evenings like tonight are sadly not just lessons of the past. Shamefully, anti-Semitism still exists today, and it exists in my own political party of choice. And quite frankly, that needs to end, and it needs to end now. Those responsible have no place in my party. They have no place in my community. They have no place in any political community at all. Now, earlier this month, I wrote in the Holocaust Memorial book in the Senedd Chamber in Cardiff Bay, and that responsibility to remember weighed heavily on myself. What words can adequately convey the horror and the need to remember it? So before addressing you today and being here this evening, I decided to undertake some research for myself. And I came across an article in the Jewish Chronicle. Now, this year's theme, as Pastor Michael has said this evening, is regarding the children, the 1.5 million children who we lost. And I think it is fitting for me to share the words of a certain Charlotte Cohen. And she wrote these words at just 14 years old in 2004. The Holocaust is a contemporary issue. It cannot and should not be an event consigned to history. Paradoxically, the reasons for this lie in its ancient roots. The Holocaust is not bound by a few years in the mid-20th century. Instead, it stretches back past the parameters of the modern era, into the medieval age and beyond, to the inception of anti-Semitism. Would the Holocaust have been possible without the protocols of the elders of Zion? Without Dreyfus? Without the Spanish Inquisition? Anti-Semitism, discrimination against Jews of all walks of life, was not a new concept in 1933, but was widespread and prevalent in many countries. It is therefore incorrect to let the Holocaust be consigned to the period of the Third Reich and the Nazi regime. The Nazi regime manipulated and amplified the latent prejudices of its citizens. It did not create them. This makes the Holocaust a contemporary issue because it demonstrates the atmosphere in which genocide can take place. How many people pertain to prejudices which are unfounded and illogical, but which are unconsciously adhered? Now, reading and listening to those words of Charlotte, 14 years old in 2004, they send a clear message to us all. We, those here this evening, those here there on a wider field, must remember those who were murdered, and let's call it that because that's what it was. And we must all ensure to teach those lessons of the past, to teach those lessons that sadly are still here on a daily basis, to ensure that it never, ever happens again. Now, as very kindly Pastor Michael said, I've been here 3 times now, and I'm very grateful for that privilege. And I'd like to use this platform tonight to say thank you again for your warm welcome, and to say thank you to you all for being here this evening. Now, I know my colleague Mark Tarmy, the Member of Parliament for Allen Deeside, wishes to be here tonight, but I very wisely advised him to stay away. He's suffering with the flu, and I'm pretty sure no one wants that. But I want to use this platform tonight on behalf of myself and Mark and others to say that we and I remain committed to helping create, because I can't do it alone, but to helping create kinder communities and a kinder world where discrimination is not accepted and that genocide does not occur ever again. So thank you all once again. There's some short messages from me. Now I think, and I know I'm right, that you're going to hear some very more well-delivered and eloquent messages, far more eloquent than I'll be able to put this evening. So thank you on behalf of myself, the warm welcome again to Emma and my mum Bernie, who's been with me on this side 3 times, and I'm sure many more times to come as well. So Pastor Michael, thank you so much. It really is a privilege. But let's just take those messages that we will commit to remembering, but we will commit to calling out hatred in the public, and we will together ensure that genocide and events like the Holocaust never, ever happen again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To present you with some flowers on behalf of Father's House for your kindness in making sure that Jack arrives here. Jack arrived early tonight, and Bernie has worked with children in this area for a long time and served the community. So Bernie, we want to say thank you to you as well. So thank you. Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I forgot to say earlier, after the service, there's refreshments through this room here, so please go. And there's a Holocaust library in there as well, and there's some information on the table here as well. So if you would do that, and if you would like to make a donation for Holocaust exhibitions, then there's a basket there as well. So I'm sorry I forgot to say that, but Jack, I want to really thank you, and I know you've got to get on the train very shortly to go down to the assembly and represent us here, and you do so very well, and we're really pleased that you're our representative. So thank you again, Jack, for that. Really appreciate it. I want to introduce you now to Beth, who is now going to take over the whole evening as far as the children are concerned, and I'm delighted, Beth, that you've accepted this role, because you can do it far better than me, so I'm really grateful. So what we'll do is we're going to turn off the lights, and Beth will now take over the evening. So I hope you enjoy the evening, and thank you again, Beth. Yes.
The actual number of children who were murdered in Holocaust can never truly be known. Historians and researchers, however, put the number who were tragically and cruelly murdered at 1.5 million. This figure includes more than 1.2 million Jewish children, tens of thousands of Romania children, and thousands of institutionalized, mentally and physically impaired children. These children were taken from their homes and families and treated without any compassion. Their childhood was stolen when they were murdered by being shot and thrown into pits, often alongside their parents, or they were gassed in vans which were used as mobile murder containers, or were taken to mass killing centres such as Auschwitz, where they were gassed, often in the arms of their parents. Many also died of starvation or disease, their demise being witnessed daily by their persecutors. These children were the victims of 6 years of horrific atrocities which were carried out by Nazi guards, German police units, local police officers, and volunteer prisoners from German-occupied countries. These murders were often witnessed by ordinary members of the communities in which these children lived. There is no defense or mitigation for those who carried out the murder of babies, infants, and young children during the terrible dark times of Holocaust. All that we can do today is to remember the suffering of those little ones and warn the world that this stain on humanity was a direct result of a teaching of hate, which influenced ordinary people to become brutal and cruel murderers. We will now listen to the stories of some of those children who were murdered. I want to ask Sophie now to introduce us to the tragic story of Thomas Corker.
Thomas Corker was the son of Elsa and Robert. His parents were married in Brno, Moravia in 1933 and moved to Olomouc in the Czech Republic, where Thomas was born. Just before Thomas's 5th birthday, the Nazis occupied their city. Because they were Jews, Thomas was not allowed to attend school and play with his non-Jewish friends. On March 31st, 1942, Thomas, along with his father, mother, grandmother, and Jewish friends, were rounded up and placed in train cattle trucks. They were sent to a camp called Theresienstadt, where they were detained and treated like animals. The journey to Theresienstadt was so distressing, as they were in crowded cattle trucks with no sanitation, and they had no food and water, and when they arrived, Thomas was immediately separated from his parents. In May the same year, Thomas and his grandmother were taken again by cattle trucks to another camp called Sobibor. As soon as they arrived at the camp, Thomas, his grandmother, and everyone else on the train were taken to the gas chamber and gassed. The death camp Sobibor operated from May 1942 until October 1943 and was built for one purpose only, to kill as many Jews as quickly as possible. Sobibor's gas chambers killed a total of 260,000 Jews. Transports arrived by rail, and prisoners were taken immediately to the gas chambers. Only 47 Jews survived Sobibor. Before the war ended, the killing installations at Sobibor were destroyed, and the area planted over with trees to hide the evidence of mass murder. I will now introduce Sarah, who will be telling the story of Jacqueline Morgenstern.
Jacqueline Morgenstern was born in 1932 to Suzanne and Karl Morgenstern, both of whom were Jews. She had a happy life living in Paris. Her father had a beauty shop in the city, and she loved her family, school, and friends. In 1944, when the Nazis started rounding up the Jews of France, Jacqueline and her friends were taken to the train station, and along with the other Jews of the city, were all crowded into cattle cars and taken to a death camp called Auschwitz. On arrival at Auschwitz, Jacqueline and her mother were separated from the rest of the family and were sent to a part of the camp for women workers. They had their heads shaved and a number was tattooed on their arms. There was so little food, Jacqueline was becoming malnourished, so her mother gave Jacqueline her own food, but that meant that her mother became ill, and as a result, she was taken to the gas chambers. After Jacqueline's mother had been murdered, she was sent to a special children's barrack where the children were being used for bogus medical experiments. In 1944, 20 Jewish children, including Jacqueline, and who were all aged between 5 and 12 years, were taken to a concentration camp called Neuengamme, just outside Hamburg. They were used as human guinea pigs in a series of medical experiments conducted by the SS doctor Kurt Heismeyer. Dr. Heismeyer removed her lymph glands for analysis, and he injected living tuberculosis bacteria into her veins and directly into her lungs. All the children became very ill. On April 20th, 1945, the day on which Adolf Hitler was celebrating his 56th birthday, and just a few days before the war ended, it was decided by SS camp leader Arnold Strippel that the children should be killed in order to destroy the evidence of the cruel experiments which had taken place there. As a result, all the children were murdered. After the war, a report by the SS was found, which stated that during the murders, none of the children had cried. I will now hand you over to Beth.
During mid-August 1941, the entire adult population of 6,000 Jews of Belya-Serkov in Ukraine were exterminated by way of mass shootings. After the extermination of the town's Jews, 90 Jewish children were found in one of the vacated apartments. 2 German documents record the fate of these children. According to a report by the chaplain of 295 Infantry Division dated August 21st, 1941, to LT Col Helmuth at Division HQ. The chaplain of the division was concerned that if these children, who were left alone without food and water, were to be found, it would be embarrassing for the division. The chaplain's report states, yesterday, August 20th, at about 3 o'clock, the division's Catholic priest and I were visited by 2 priests from the nearby field hospital. They told us that about 500 meters from here, they found between 80 and 90 babies and children under school age in one of the buildings. Their shouts and weeping could be heard a long way off. I went with the 2 priests and my friend, the Catholic priest, to his house and saw children sitting and lying in 2 small rooms, some in their own filth. And the main thing is that there was not a drop of drinking water, and the children were terribly thirsty. A Ukrainian policeman was guarding them. We learned from him that these are Jewish children whose parents had been shot. A group of German soldiers stood around the house, and the 2 discussed excitedly what they had seen and heard. Since I assume that it is undesirable for such things to become common knowledge, I am reporting it. The chaplain made no plea for the children. That day, the division's commander sent a report to the commander of the 6th Army and ordered EK5 Commander Blobel to leave immediately for Belya-Serkov, with the 6th Army representative to assess the situation. At the same time, he decided that the action that had begun should be completed, but in a suitable manner. The meaning of this division was that the murder of the last remaining children must be continued. After the war officer Hafner of Sonderkommando 4A, who participated in the execution of the children, testified. He said, "Blobel ordered me to execute the children. I asked him, who is going to carry out the shooting? He replied, the Waffen SS. I said to him, they are all young people. How can we explain to them that they are to shoot small children? I suggested that the execution be carried out by the Ukrainian police, under the command of the field commander. No one opposed this suggestion. I set off for the woods. Soldiers had already dug the pit, and they were shot. I remember especially a little blonde girl who grabbed my hand. She too was shot. Some of the children had to be shot 4 or 5 times. The concerns of Hafner, as you can see, were not for the children, but for those young men who had been ordered to shoot them. I will now introduce you to Kira from Queensferry Primary School.
Manfred was born in 1929 to a German family in Dortmund and grew up with his loving parents and sister Gerda. He was born with water on the brain and epilepsy, but was a loving child. In 1942, his family were currently sent him to a children's care home in Applebeck in belief that he would receive better care than they could give him in the wartime. His parents were unaware that Applebeck was part of the secret euthanasia program, which the doctors and nurses killed the patients in their care. 6 months after Manfred's arrival in Applebeck, he was murdered by his doctors because they considered him unworthy of life. Manfred was one of the 70,000 Germans who were murdered by Nazi doctors because they were disabled in some way.
I will now introduce you to Isabel from Queensferry Primary School.
On 19th of May, 10-year-old Anna Marie Settler Steinbach, together with 244 other Romani, were transported from Westerbork to the Netherlands to Auschwitz-Birkenau. The train also contained Jewish prisoners. Just as the doors of the train were being closed, Settler stared through a small opening, and Rudolf Bresler, a Jewish prisoner in Westerbork who was shooting a movie, orders of the German camp commander, captured an image of Settler's fearful glance out of the wagon. Settler and her family and other Roma gassed in Auschwitz-Birkenau along with the Jews who travelled along with her. The Nazis considered the Roma a social racial problem. They were rounded up and sent to concentration camps after the war began. Others were concentrated in transit camps but sent to ghettos and exterminated camps during the war. It is estimated that between 90,000 and 150,000 Roma were murdered by the Germans throughout Europe, but some historians say that this figure could be as high as 500,000.
I will now introduce Sophia.
There is one other thing we can remember, and that is that in the midst of the dark oppression which hung over the ghettos and murder camps, there were those who risked their lives to rescue the condemned children, and they should also be a part of our remembrance, and they are examples to us all of what we can do today to stop the teaching and incitement of hatred of any people group and prevent another genocide similar to the Holocaust taking place. Let me introduce you to Janis Kozak.
Janusz Korczak was born Henryk Goldschmidt on July 22, 1878, to an assimilated Jewish family in Warsaw, Poland. When Korczak's father died after a prolonged illness in 1896, Korczak started giving private lessons as he had become the sole breadwinner for his family. The family environment in which he grew up undoubtedly influenced his personal development and his awareness and sensitivity towards social problems. In 1898, he participated in a literary contest and he used the pseudonym Janusz Korczak for the first time. Korczak studied medicine at the University of Warsaw. He specialized as a pediatrician and worked at the Children's Hospital. At the same time, he wrote for several Polish newspapers. During the Russo-Japanese War, in which he served as a military doctor, he came to the conclusion that it was as an educator rather than as a doctor that he could really make a lasting impression and contribution to the world. In 1912, he became the director of Dom Sierot, the orphanage of his own design for Jewish children in Warsaw. Korczak's multifaceted personality as a writer, pediatrician, and pedagogue led to his innovative approach and to the revolution he wrought in relation to the child, which was expressed in various forms in his orphanage. In his educational system, Korczak advocated an education through dialogue in which the child should be empowered, enriched with values, and given the best tools to develop his personal skills and independence. In the orphanage, he established a republic for children, with its own small parliament, law court, and newspaper. As his deputy director and the house mother, Korczak appointed Stefania Wilczynska, Stefa, who believed in the same educational principles as he did and became his right hand. In addition to his work at the orphanage, he founded a Polish children's newspaper called Mały Przegląd, The Small Review, and had his own radio program in which he answered educational questions. Janusz Korczak's work with children allowed him to put in practice his educational views, but it was as a writer that Korczak had the greatest effect during his lifetime and in generations to come. He wrote over 20 books, many of them about children's rights and the child's life experience in the adult world. In 1939, World War II erupted and Poland was occupied by Germany. During the first months of the occupation, the number of children in the orphanage increased because it was necessary to receive children who had lost their families during the bombing. When the Germans ordered the Jews to move into the Warsaw Ghetto after it was sealed in 1940, Korczak's orphanage was forced to move to the ghetto as well. Korczak went with the children, even though he had repeatedly been offered shelter on the Aryan side. He always refused these offers, saying that he could not abandon his children. During the ghetto period, with all the difficulty and background of changing orders, Korczak stuck to his educational path. The orphanage continued to operate according to the arrangements that characterized it in the pre-war period, and the children continued to take part in the administration of the institution and in conducting public trials. At the orphanage, there were plays and concerts that attracted the public, and every Saturday, Korczak would tell a story to the children that they had chosen for themselves. In addition, in view of the harsh reality and sometimes the loss of values outside, Korczak tried his best to educate the children to honesty and truth. Despite his frail health and personal problems, he coped with the reality of the ghetto and did everything to better the life of the children in the orphanage. On the 5th of August, 1942, he boarded the train with the children to Treblinka, where together with Stefa, about 12 members of his orphanage's staff and around 200 children all went to their deaths in the gas chambers.
Now let me introduce you to Irina Sendler.
Irena Sendler was a Polish Catholic nurse who worked in Warsaw during the Nazi occupation of Poland and saved 2,500 Jewish children from certain death. During that time, she worked for the Warsaw Social Services. After the creation of the Warsaw Ghetto, Irena Sendler was able to save many children by smuggling them out of the ghetto to save them from being deported to the concentration camps. She transported the children in ambulances as if they were sick from typhus, hid them in trash cans, tool chests, supply boxes or coffins, and later put them in convents and Polish Catholic families. She created an archive with the real identities of the children, so one day they could be reunited with their family members. She wrote on a strip of paper the Jewish names of the children with the new Polish name and addresses where they were taken. All of them she put in a jar, which she buried by a tree in a garden. In 1943, she was detained by the Gestapo and taken to prison, where she was brutally tortured. She never betrayed her mission, and she was sentenced to death, but a soldier freed her thanks to the intervention from the Polish resistance. At the end of the war, she was able to recover her archives, although most of the families of children she saved had died in concentration camps. In 1965, the organization Yad Vashem in Jerusalem granted her the title Righteous Among the Nations. During last year of her life, she received thanks from many children she had saved and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I dopóki jeszcze będę żyła i dopóki mi sił starczy, to będę głosiła, że najważniejsze jest dobro.
I would like to introduce you to a very special guest, Izzy Owen, from Myers Garman High School, who will play two pieces by John Williams, both of which were included in the film Schindler's List. now ask if we could just have a moment of silence just to think back on what we've just heard. I would like to introduce you to Steffi from Yad Vashem.
Good evening. Shavua Tov. Since it's Sunday, the beginning of the week in Israel, after Shabbat, we begin to say Shavua Tov. May you have a good week. We're going to talk about children of the Holocaust. And I want to focus on the face of the individual. With tremendous respect, I want to suggest that 2 months from now, a year from now, you won't remember 1.5 million as the number of children murdered in the Holocaust. What you will remember is the face of Irena Sendler, the face of Janusz Korczak, the faces that you see above on the screen. These are some of the children and their parents that were part of one of the last Hungarian transports to Auschwitz. Those pictures come from a collection of pictures entitled the Auschwitz Album, which was found accidentally by a young girl named Lily Jacob, who is becoming healthier and healthier, recuperating in a hospital after the war. And she's a curious young girl, so she opens the drawer next to her, and she finds this beautiful leather album, a picture album. She begins to open it and look through the pictures, and she sees her brothers, the rabbi of her community, her neighbors, her parents. The Auschwitz album is the only documentation that we have of these Hungarian transports, the only real documentation of what happened and to whom it happened on the ramp of Auschwitz. These are the faces of the individual. Because 1.5 million ultimately will always be a number, and we don't comprehend it in the same way. And so what I want to talk to you about is the who of the Holocaust, the people that were murdered and some that lived, the children. These are the faces of the children I embraced and kissed and loved. I cannot imagine that they are dead, that none would survive. 1.5 million children among the 6 million. But this I knew. I wanted to save their faces, not their ashes. These children, and these children. This is the photographic documentation of a photographer named Roman Vishniak, who in the interwar period realized how the world was moving and wanted to make sure that the face of European Jewry was preserved and protected. But of course, the face of individuals is part of a greater collective. No, you're fine, Becky. The next one, just don't play it yet. This is a joint effort. We're a team, me and Becky. We're going to get this done. The face of the individual is also part of the face of the collective. So what you're looking at now is a children's choir from a place called Munkac. Hungary, Czechoslovakia, depending on where we are on the chronological timeline. We have the piece of film that you're about to see because the rabbi's daughter was getting married in this small place of Munkac. And so the children's choir comes. The song you're going to hear will probably be familiar to many of you, if not all of you. It's a song that was written in the late 1800s by a composer and a poet named Naftali Imber. The name of the song is The Hope, or as you may know it, Hatikva. There you have the face of the individual that is also part of the face of the collective, the tribe, the people, Am Israel. The best historiography that we have tells us that not one of those children survived. How would the world have been different? How would the 20th century been different, the 21st century been different, if 15 or 10, 5, 1 of those children had been allowed life? Would there have been a cure for cancer, peace in the Middle East? We don't know. They're not there. So this is part of who we remember. The faces of children who were not allowed life. Why not? What did they do? What was the big crime they committed? Their big crime, just like their parents and their neighbors and everyone around them, was that they were Jewish. That's what sent them to be murdered. Now, when we look at the face of the Jews who were murdered, and I am specifically not saying the victims, because the Jewish people in general were not born as victims, that's not the only face that's part of the story. We need to know about the perpetrator. Someone murdered intentionally these children. Who does this? Why do you do it? Now Becky's going to show us in just a minute a piece of film that is the only connection we're going to make in this short period to the perpetrator. But I want to set it up for you a little bit before we begin it. The person that you're going to be hearing and seeing tonight is an attorney named Ben Ferenc. Ferenc was a Hungarian-born American lawyer. He was an investigator of Nazi war crimes after World War II and the chief prosecutor for the United States Army at the Einsatzgruppen trial. There were 4 Einsatzgruppe killing units that went through Eastern Poland and Soviet Russia, A, B, C, and D. The trial of these men was the 9th of the 12 trials that were held by the Americans. Very few people were even convicted, let alone hung. But the head of Einsatzgruppe D is a man named Otto Ohlendorf. Cultured, sophisticated. This is what Ben Ferenc wants us to know.
Some of them lied outrageously. Was Juden erschossen, das höre ich zum ersten Mal. Which meant, I hear now for the first time that Jews were killed. Some said we were only obeying superior orders, this was standard. Others said I wasn't there. I could play one against the other. The mentality was all the same. These were loyal German Nazi fanatics who believed in what they were doing, who thought what they were doing was right. The best explanation for the justification for what they did was given by Otto Ohlendorf. Ohlendorf was an intelligent man, Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, father of 5 children, general in the SS, and a fairly honest man. He explained why he did this. And it's important to know the mentality of mass murderers. If you want to stop mass murderers, you must know what motivates them. How do their minds work? And Ohlendorf was the perfect man to explain that to me, and I drew it out of him, and the judges drew it out of him as well. What do you mean, self-defense? Nobody attacked Germany. Germany attacked Poland, Russia, France, Belgium, Holland, Sweden, Norway. Where's your self-defense? He said. But we knew that Soviet Union intended to attack us, and therefore we had to attack them first to preempt an attack against us. And why did you kill all the Jews? Well, everybody knows the Jews were sympathetic to the Bolsheviks, and so you had to kill them too. And why did you kill all the children? Well, if we eliminated the parents, the children would grow up and they would be enemies of the Reich as well. So we were interested in the long-term security of our country, and therefore we had to kill the children too, as if to say it's perfectly logical to kill thousands of little children.
The father of 5 children. And he says, and I want you to take this away with you, it is important to know the mentality of mass murderers if you want to stop mass murder. And that's part of why we're here tonight. But it's not the only reason why we're here tonight. And part of the educational philosophy that I grew up on at Yad Vashem is about bringing participants, teachers, whoever is in front of me, safely in and safely out of the Holocaust. So know that that is as bad as it's going to get, and now I'm going to bring you some spots of light, and I'm going to bring you safely out if you stick with me. So let's go ahead. This is the artwork of a 12-year-old Czechoslovakian girl named Helga Weissova. There's a book that you can buy of her collected artwork, this 12-year-old, and the title of it comes from the last thing that her father said to her when they were separated. Helga initially lived with her parents in the family home, but then went to the girls' home. And the last thing he said about her artwork, not the last thing he ever said to her, but about her artwork as she went to a different place at Ghetto Terezin, was draw what you see. And so she did. And the picture that's on your right is one that she drew about a friend that she had in Terezin. And this little girl was someone that she sat on the bunks with and talked about their lives. And they found out they were born in the same hospital in the same year. And so they planned that when the war would end, they would grow up and marry and be mothers and stroll their babies together in their prams down the streets of Prague. That was the dream. That was the wish. Helga and Franzi. Helga survived. The Face of Hope and Perseverance, yes? This is the collection of work of one of the magazines of the boys in Terezin. These boys, aged between 12 and 15, worked tirelessly during the week on things that they wanted to present to each other on Friday night, on the Shabbat. And there was poetry, and there were short stories. There were interviews that they did with grown-ups in Terezin. And they would sit and they would read to each other, and their drawings are included. The magazine is entitled Vidim. And this went on between 1942 and 1944, almost nonstop, until Terezin was ultimately rid of all of its inhabitants. But Vidim means, depending on who you speak to, in the lead, or better yet, and I have this from a Czech educator, we are leading. So think for a moment about the significance of this. 12-year-old boys who entitle their regular magazine, We Are Leading. That's the face of children. That's the hope. That's the perseverance. That's the belief in life. We are leading. At the end of World War II, at the end of the Holocaust, there were over 800 pages of the magazine that survived. 800 pages is an awful lot of artwork and writing in 2 years. That's the face of the children. Most of them, the 1.5 million that we don't have with us, don't have among us. Wunderbar, a children's opera brought to Terezin by its composer, a man named Hans Krasse. One thing that we see in terms of this story is the dedication of artists who ultimately become teachers, and of course teachers as well. But Hans Krasse originally composed Wunderbar as a children's opera for the children in the orphanage in Prague. When he was deported to Terezin, he reasoned that there would be children there, and maybe he could help alleviate some of their fear and their concern by teaching them to sing and to perform the children's opera. It was performed in Ghetto Terezin by children 55 times. It's the story of how good triumphs over evil, and it's the evil accordion player who, interestingly enough, is an evil man with a great big mustache. Wonder what they were thinking about. Let's take a look.
Viva
remember those faces. They're some of the 15,000 children who went through Ghetto Terezin. Less than 10% were alive at liberation. This is someone that I know well in Jerusalem. His name is Yehuda Bakon. He's a well-known artist of the period. He was born in Ostrava, Czechoslovakia, in 1929 to a traditional Jewish religious family. He's sent in 1941 to Terezin. He is taken under the wing of famous artists of the period in Ghetto Terezin, Friedrich Frita, Otto Unger, Leo Haas. Ultimately, he's sent to the camp, the family camp in Auschwitz. He survives the war, and after the war is one of the children who are sent to an orphanage, a DP camp, but a special place for children. And you can see in his artwork this figure leading him out of darkness towards a palm tree. Yehuda Bakon lives in Israel, but he writes about this person who's leading him, whose name is Peter Peshmichel. Peter was a wonderful person, and I think he saved us from the horror of the past. It was the first time we trusted someone. We didn't trust anyone. Why would we? Why would anybody be kind to us? Everybody wanted to hit and kill us. And he wasn't a missionary or a propagandist who tried to persuade us to do one thing or another. He and his friends, it was their kindness that changed us. All the children who still live today remember him. Both Jews and Germans can't forget him. So I painted a picture, Peter bringing me from death to earth, from darkness to light. 40 years later, Peter was awarded Righteous Among the Nations at Yad Vashem. This is part of a favorite quote of mine. It comes from Elie Wiesel. What hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. So I want you to meet these two couples. The couple at the bottom, is Leah and Simon Joselevich. The couple at the top is Milkas and Elena Lukauskas. Leah and Shimon have two children, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. And it's very clear in Kovno how the story is beginning to evolve, and they give their two children, desperate as they are, to someone to care for and to protect them. But this person can't keep them for very long. They have their own children, they're afraid, whatever the circumstance, but they know someone they can pass this 9-year-old and this 5-year-old along to. And so Leah writes a letter in which she says, in part, "My dear friends whose name we do not know, we have no words to describe your humane deed. We are sad and happy at the same time, knowing that at a time when mankind lost its humanity, there are good and humane people who will help and save our children. We ask for only one thing: educate our children to be honest and useful to society. Be their father and their mother. Give them the education you believe in, because a child's character can be molded. We have tried to educate them to love their neighbors, to be honest and good." One last matter. Should we not survive, explain to our children that their parents were honest people who lived for the sake of their children and died a martyr's death. May fate be better to you than it was to us. Our gratitude to you is endless. and Milkas and Elena Lukauskas were also awarded Righteous Among the Nations by Yad Vashem. Leah says something very, very important. We ask only one thing: educate our children. I'm going to close with one piece of video. It will be, I'm sure, a familiar face to you, a story that you already know, but a little different piece of the story. You don't have to be a teacher to educate. You're here clearly because you believe in the importance of Holocaust education. What we learn and what we pass on, we really have no idea how far it can go and what kinds of miracles and wonderful events can come out of it. So whoever you are and wherever you are going, this is my plea, my prayer for Holocaust education.
Many young people from different countries were eager to show Winton what good they themselves were doing. So they started filming their activities, interviewing various personalities, all for a special program which they will present in Prague.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Nicholas Winton.
We've been so much impressed by Nicholas Winton's story that we started our project, Suitcases for Cambodia. Suitcase is a symbol of our help for children.
I just think that every single person on the earth needs to know that they're special, that they're loved.
Nicholas Winton has influenced so many people all over the world to help someone who is very ill or in danger.
Is that you don't have to be a politician or a billionaire to make a difference. All you have to have is some ambition and courage.
I never thought what I did 70 years ago was going to have such a big impact as apparently it has. And if it has now got a story which helps people to live for the future, well, that will be an added bonus.
anything that isn't actually impossible can be done. Thank you very much.
Well, we've had a lot of information, and our hearts are already sad, aren't they? But I want to give you an opportunity now to process some of the things that you heard from the children, the beautiful music from Izzy, and that wonderful presentation from Steffi. And as we do that, we're going to listen to a piece of music. But I want to speak about this photograph here at the top of this banner. This was given to me by a professor of history in Minsk who had lost his parents at Trostenest by way of shooting. And he was given this picture here, which he gave me, which was photoshopped so we could see exactly what's happening, because the picture originally was very, very dark. And we can see that a soldier is shooting a mother and her baby daughter, her child. And the picture is quite distressing. But that story began with words. It began with the speaking of hatred. And there's a scripture that says that the mouth speaks from the heart. And we need to stop anti-Semitism today. We need to stop it verbally in writing. And we have an opportunity in our generation to actually be the type of person that Nicholas Winton was, and be a rescuer, not a bystander or a persecutor, but a people who can speak against hatred on every level about every minority group who is persecuted and living in our islands today. We don't want to see this happen again. So we're going to play this piece of music and turn off the lights and focus on that picture and say, are we going to allow hatred to prosper in our nation? Or are we going to be those who speak against it? So thank you. I'm so privileged to have worked alongside the children, Izzy and Steffi, tonight. So we're going to give a presentation to those people who honoured not only us tonight, but honoured Holocaust and honoured the people who died, and also honoured those who are alive today, the survivors of that terrible event. So let's do that, and let's, first of all, Beth, come out and we'll want to ask Steffi to present some flowers, if you would, Steffi. Beth, I've presented Holocaust for 15 years, and you know, you were marvelous tonight. Far better than I have ever been. So you've got the job, Beth. So let's give it a round of applause. I never got chocolates when I did those. No. Sophie, you were amazing. Absolutely amazing. And some of the words that you had to read tonight were so difficult. So we want to thank you, Sophie, for your part in this. Thank you. Sarah? Well, you spoke like a true educator. Didn't she speak so well? Absolutely amazing. So thank you, Sarah, for your work tonight. And Sophia, you were amazing introducing us to those who rescued and tried to rescue in Holocaust. So thank you so much. And they're the Father's House team, but now we've got Queensferry Primary School team. So Isabel, can you come out, please? Thank you so much for reading so well. And I know that you will go back to school and tell them all about the Holocaust, won't you? And what you've taught us. You did so well. So thank you so much. And Kira, you were brilliant as well. So I know you're so small, but actually you pack a punch with the way you read. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And Izzy, wasn't her playing absolutely wonderful? Absolutely wonderful. You've got the job, Izzy. You've definitely got the job. And like we did with Jack Sargent, I don't want to give Jack Sargent flowers, and I don't want to give Mr. Thornhill flowers. But I'd like to give his wife some flowers, just to say thank you for your husband and the hard work that he does for Holocaust education in this area. So thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Becky, we want to thank Steffi, don't we? So can you come out? Both Becky and I studied at Yad Vashem under Steffi, and she looked after us while we were there. She's an educator right to the core. She wants to tell us about what she knows about Holocaust every moment of her life. And you've really blessed us tonight, Steffi. And tomorrow, Steffi will run a seminar from 10 o'clock here until 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And you're all very welcome to come. I know we'll learn a lot, and we'll be really blessed. So thank you so much, Steffi. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to say thank you so much to everybody who came. The visitors and everybody from Father's House as well. And please come back next year. Please bring your friends, because the more people know about Holocaust, the more people will be in a place where we can speak against hatred. So let me pray for you all. So Father, I want to thank you for this time. Thank you for all those who played a part in this memorial service. Father, we thank you for those Jewish people who have survived the Holocaust. But thank you for those who educate, like our children tonight, and Steffi, who have given us tonight a lot to think about and a lot to do in the future. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. So please have a look at the exhibition and help yourselves to